U/Prois Doncourage, my high school girlfriend asked if she could mail some sexy underwear/kink stuff to my house because she couldn't pass off getting mail when her parents collect it. Fine with my family is very serious about privacy, however my neighbor wasn't, and the mailman delivered it to her house. She opened it not realizing it was addressed to my house. She panicked, not knowing what to do, and brought it to my house. I wasn't home, so my older sister collected it and left it on my bed. When I returned home, all my sister said was, "There's a package on your bed and we're never speaking of this again." I found it hysterical. My girlfriend was mortified. U/MRDRBRGR, I was about 15. Definitely old enough to know better. I was putting spiders and ice cubes on the super hot wood stove because the Leidenfrost effect was interesting. I thought it would be funny to do it with piss. It was not funny to do it with piss. For the uninitiated, what happens is the piss vaporizes and depending on the volume of your bladder, produces a thick and clearly visible dark brown cloud. If you can imagine the smog line in LA, it looks like that. That cloud hugs the ceiling and hangs down about a foot. It doesn't really move because it's water vapor and it leaves a film on everything it touches. It smells like, well, like burnt piss, and you can also taste it. The cloud absolutely does not dissipate before your mother gets home from work. I was sort of a naughty kid anyhow, so she thought I had started a fire with something. In order to avoid a worse punishment I had to take dumb responsibility. That was the only time I can remember her looking at me with actual hatred. U/ChubbyBunny1324, when I was a teenager, my best friend was over and we were drinking. I was probably 14 to 15. My mom had just recently found out my stepdad cheated on her and they got into a huge fight that night and he stormed off and left. My friend went out to our loft on the second floor and came running back into my room and said, "Chubby Bunny, your mom is trying to kill herself." I drunkenly ran out of my room and saw a curtain tied around the banister of the loft, and my mom roping it around her neck on the floor below while standing on a chair. I ran downstairs, grabbed a knife, held it to my stomach and was screaming/sobbing that if she killed herself, I'd kill myself too. And I meant it too. I was prepared to stab myself in that moment. That was the only thing that made sense as an intoxicated teen at the time, the only way to get my mom to not hurt herself. She got down from the chair, grabbed the knife from me, and we both sobbed together. She then had an inpatient stay for a few days after that. We've not spoken about it since. Edit. I've minimized and blocked this story out of my brain pretty much since it's happened, and now that I'm seeing reactions to it, I realize this is something that shouldn't be minimized and I should probably deal with. My mom and I live states away from each other, and this unfortunately is just a blip within the issues that have compounded since then. She refuses to step foot in a therapist's office, not for lack of me trying to get her there, and refuses to acknowledge her mental health is an issue. Because of these reasons, it's not really an option for me to revisit this with her, and would very likely do more harm to her than good. But, I know I should address this in therapy for myself. For those who have had similar experiences, thank you for sharing your stories. You are all incredibly strong, and so brave, and I'm sending all my love to you. U/Jennifu33, my sister and I thought we had a moment like this, but we spoke of it years later and we both had a misunderstanding all along. I grew up with two sisters, I was the youngest, then there were 2 years between each of my older sisters. My middle sister and I were closer to each other than we were to the older one. One time when I was about 15, my mom found a used condom in the trash. Since my oldest sister was living away at college at the time, we figured it wasn't hers. So my sister and her boyfriend, who thought she was being a good sibling, thought it was mine and took the blame for it. Don't think she got in much trouble, but she thought she was doing me a favor. It was actually not mine, and I assumed that since she accepted blame for it, then it was her. Nothing more happened. Years later, I was out with my sister and her boyfriend, same one from high school, and she jokingly made a comment trying to get me to do her a favor, like, "It's the least you could do after I took the blame for that condom for you that one time." I was so confused and had no idea what she was talking about till she explained the event and we realized the years-long unspoken event. I guess it must have been my sister who'd been home from college in secret for a while, There was no husband for my mom at the time, so no cheating allegations. We had a good laugh for the rest of the night. I still think it's funny that we both interpreted the event in such different ways for so long. Edit. A few people were wondering why my sister would have been home from college in secret. This sister did and still does a lot of shady things, hide stuff from us, etc., so it wouldn't have surprised me at all if she were home for a quickie and told none of us. People also are saying it's likely my sister was cheating on her boyfriend, but if that were the case, I would think she would have just denied it being hers altogether, and also not brought it up again years later in front of that boyfriend. Kinhammer, well, me and the wife were out on the lake fishing. When all of a sudden I felt the rumbling in my gut, I was about to shit my pants. I looked around and noticed we were nowhere near a dock and there was nobody else on the water, so I looked my wife in the eye and told her I was sorry and loved her very much. I then proceeded to hang my ass over the side of the boat and had the Hershey squirts. It was over quite quickly, thankfully. My wife passed me a few old receipts from her purse so I could wipe. She told me she still loved me and we kept on fishing. Edit. I'd like to clarify that we did indeed move to a different part of the lake when I finished. What kind of sicko do you take me for? Edit. The second, my most upvoted comment is about me having diarrhea on a lake. WTF is wrong with you, Reddit? Also, my wife is insisting that I point out that we'd been married less than a year at that point. Deleted. I got up one night to get some water, and found that my teenage son was in the kitchen getting food. He was behind the kitchen counter, so I could only see him from the waist up. When he came around the counter into the hall, two things happened simultaneously. He noticed me, and his eyes grew wide in horror, and I saw that he was butt naked except for a pair of socks. He starts trying to panic run backwards on the tile floor. Imagine Scooby-Doo trying to run but getting stuck in place in a flurry of limbs, but ended up slipping and taking a hard seat on the tile. Worst of all, he dropped his hot pocket. I made sure he was okay, then went back to bed and laughed my ass off. Years later, we were driving and reminiscing about funny memories. I said, "Do you remember that night?" and he cut me off with, "Yes." I didn't even have to specify which night. We knew, and we were silent. Billy the Wrist, my father and I had a porn Cold War. There has been a tacit agreement never to speak of it, and we haven't. When I was a teenager, my mother found my hetero porn stash. Both parents confronted me with it when I got home from school. And of course confiscated it. And of course threw it in the bin, or so I thought. Months later, I happened upon my collection, hidden at the bottom of my dad's wardrobe. Hidden from my mother, clearly, so I took it back and hid it in my bedroom. What's he going to do? Tell my mother I'd taken the porn he'd hidden from her that he was supposed to have thrown out, and he found it again. And took it back. And hid it, and I found it again. And took it back. And hid it. This went on for years. And it's never been mentioned, and it never will be. NLAxbro, had my first full breakdown almost in front of my friend group and our older friend group, brother of one of my friends and his friends we had known for a good while. I was drunk, but never in my life have I been an emotional drunk. Something about the mix of making a fool of myself a few times, weird interactions with old friends, and goddamn Kid Cudi playing on blast. Fucking Pursuit of Happiness just has too many sentimental attachments for me to listen to it at a kickback. So I get targeted in a drinking game and end up deeper than I thought I was. I'm sitting alone just scrolling on my phone, my mind on absolute full steam, and my friend asks what's up. I sorta just shook my head, and a minute or two later said I was about to leave. He follows me down the stairs, away from the group, and again asks what's up. After a few seconds that felt like 15 minutes, he opens his arms and gives me a hug. I proceed to break down. This was basically the first time I've ever cried in front of friends. I went home, and he next morning texted asking if I was alright. We never spoke of it in person, or at all minus those two brief texts. Man, did I need a hug that night. Earthworm Jim 94, my step-brother and I were doing dabs in our parents' shed in Florida. We were using a cheap Bernzomatic torch, and when we were done, I turned the nozzle off, or so I thought, and put it on the shelf. We left to go to the beach, but I forgot the towels 'cause marijuana. Come back 15 minutes later to see smoke pouring out of the shed. I jump out of the car and run to it while he grabbed the hose. Without thinking, just grab the torch and throw it into the bushes. Luckily the flame actually went out this time. He's spaying the shelves down, trying to put out the fire, while I'm using a floor mat to fan the smoke out. The shed was connected to the house and had the washer and dryer in it. Plus our parents were renting the place. We do our best to clean up and dry everything, didn't say a damn word about it. 5 months later, I overhear a conversation between our parents about losing their security deposit when moving out, because of the hole burnt through the ceiling in the shed. They never saw it, but I knew, and I kept my mouth shut. Sorry Mom.